Hey there. Alrighty, welcome back if you've joined us before, and if not, well, welcome in general. In this video, we're going to discuss a little bit more about blending modes and what they are and how they work, specifically the multiply blending mode and how we're going to use it to recover exposure on overexposed photos such as this one. So this is a photo that I took back in 2003 of my daughter before I knew anything about photography whatsoever. I'm pretty sure I used a flash here when I probably didn't need to, which made the photo much more overexposed than it probably should have or needed to be. And I would like to recover that a little bit so we can have a little bit more detail. And you could do this by using or by just doing a general edit in either Lightroom or Camera Raw in Photoshop. But there's a quick and fast way to recover the exposure, and that's using the multiply blending mode. Because blending modes is the blending of two different layers, I'm going to duplicate my layer, and I can either do this by going up here to Layer, oops, and Duplicate, or I can do Command J on my keyboard or Control J if you're on a PC. And now I have an exact copy of my background layer here. Okay, so now that we've duplicated the layer, let's take a look at what the blending modes can do for those layers. And we're always going to blend the top layer of the two layers that we want to blend together. And remember that this drop-down menu is the blending mode drop-down for the layers versus if you have your brush selected over here, this is also a blending mode. However, it is for the tool itself, not for the layers, but for the tools. So keep that in mind. When we are blending layers together, we will always use this menu over here. Okay, so normal is just normal. It really does not do anything at all. It's just the layer is there. Okay, so dissolve is more for a graphic effect. It will give a dissolved look, hence the name, to the image, more on the outer edges of the image. And we never really use this. Actually, I can say that I have never, me personally, I have never used this, and I don't think Jay has either, because there are other ways that we have found that will give that dissolve effect, and it's more manipulate. We can manipulate it and make a better effect. Okay, so let's look at the darkening group. If we do darken, you're not going to see a whole lot, if any, change in this particular instance because darken is used for mostly for composite imaging. And again, in this case, it did absolutely nothing because the two images that we're blending, or the two layers that we are blending, are the exact same. This is because Photoshop in the darkening mode takes a look at the two layers and the pixels in each layer and decides which of the pixels from those layers are darker. And then it shows only those darker pixels. And again, because this is the exact same image in between the two layers and everything is perfectly aligned, there's not going to be a darker pixel to be chose. So nothing happened. Okay, so the multiply mode, which is what we're going to be using for this photo in the edit, is it basically does what it's called. It multiplies the darkness value between the pixels of the layers and produces a much richer or darker image between the two layers using the darker pixels. And then, so we'll toggle back and forth on that, and you can see that already looks a lot better. Not only can we see details, but we can see the colors that weren't there before, like the blue in the, oops, let me change my tool here so we can see. So the blue in this sleeper or onesie or whatever it is, it's probably a sleeper jammy. Anyway, by multiplying the pixels, we can see that it's actually blue and not just an off-white with a blue little ant I don't know what it is. Anyway, okay, so let's quickly take a look at the rest of the blending modes and briefly talk about them so that we can kind of have an idea how everything works, and then you can see why we're choosing multiply versus some of the other modes. Okay, so the lightening group does pretty much the same thing as the darken group, only obviously it lightens the image instead of darkens it. So the lighten mode does the same thing as the darken, but it chooses the lighter pixels to reveal and use. And again, in this image, nothing happened because it's the exact same image between the two layers. And the screen mode is the exact opposite of the multiply mode. It takes the pixels between the two layers, and if you think about it mathematically, instead of multiplying, it is dividing, which then gives a more dramatic overexposure versus multiplying the pixels to make them darker and richer. It makes them lighter and lighter, which then pretty much takes away from your image. And as you can see, some of our distinguishing details, like you can no longer see the details in this jammy here, and well, that's not good in this case. Okay, oops. All right, and let's go to, and then we have the color burn, linear burn, darker color, which darker color doesn't really do anything. It kind of works as the same as the darken, and then you have color dodge, linear dodge, lighter color. Lighter color, again, it's not going to do anything because it's kind of like the lighten function. All right, so on to the contrast blending mode group. Oops. On to the contrast blending mode group, and the most used, or I'm not going to say the most used because everybody uses all of these differently, but the most commonly used blending mode that we use, or that I use, is the soft light blending mode. And it is kind of a combination of the multiply and screen modes. For the pixels that are in the middle of the road gray, or like maybe best described as the midtones, they aren't going to be adjusted or blended. For pixels that are darker or lighter than those midtones, those are going to be either made darker or lighter with the blending, respectively. And we'll take a look at the soft light in more detail in a future video when we do a little vanity retouching. Okay, and these modes, these blending modes down here, while they have maybe some interesting effects, and these ones here aren't going to do anything because again it's the exact same image, are not used very often by us. The most commonly used one by us is when Jay does his grading assignments for his photography class. He uses difference, and what he does is he'll take, if there's an image that looks very, very, very similar between two students or two assignments, he will take those assignments, put them into two different layers, and use the difference mode. And if the screen goes completely black like this, then that means those two students turned in the same exact file, thus cheating. So in this case, because we have these two images are the exact same, we do difference and it goes completely black. Okay, so now that we've taken a quick look at these different blending modes, let's go back to, we're going to use the multiply blending mode. And as you can see, we have recovered some of that exposure very easily and very quickly without doing a whole lot of editing. Okay, so that's looking a lot better now that we've multiplied these two layers. And as you can see, the face has a lot more color in it. You can see the details of these chubby little cheeks and this little chin. We'll toggle back and forth. Well, you could see them a little bit before, but they're a little bit better now. And then also, too, you can actually tell that this jammy is supposed to be blue. I mean, you can kind of tell, but it's very much more apparent after we've multiplied those pixels that it is actually blue. And the color of the couch is a lot more saturated. And honestly, if I remember correctly, the color of the couch there, that's a little bit more of a realistic view of it. But you know, that doesn't matter. Anyway, and the shadow back here is a lot darker, and you can't even tell really that this is a chair now. It's just like a black blob. Okay, so now what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to duplicate this layer and do a Control J or Command J, whichever Mac or PC. And as you can see, this I not only copied the layer as an image, but it also kept the blending mode as well. It duplicated it all for everything that it has, and that is making everything just that much more apparent as far as details go on the baby. Okay, so now we're going to play with a little bit of masking to edit the photo just a little bit more, to make this a little bit more aesthetically pleasing and a little bit more realistic, because her face is not that red or pink, if you will. But first, I'm going to add a mask down here in this little icon here, add a layer mask, and you can do that through the layer menu as well up here. And I'm going to use my gradient function, or my gradient tool over here in the toolbar. And I'm going to use, and first of all, we're going to create a vignette, which makes the outer edge a little bit darker than the center. I'm sure you've seen all those old photos where the outer, it's like an oval around the subject. That's what we're going to do. So I have my gradient tool over here selected, and I'm going to select my radial gradient up here in this toolbar here. And then if for some reason your color is different, you can double click this up here and then double click down here to get your color. So mine was red before, and I changed it back to black. Just for demonstration purposes, I probably should have allowed you to see that. But you can see that this is green over here. We can change this to white. And those are that way because they are the default, or I'm sorry, they're not the default. They are the last colors that I used when I used this tool. So now that we have those both black and white, we're going to hit OK. Okay, and because my mask is white, remember, white reveals, black conceals, WRBC. So everything on this layer or in this blending mode is being revealed right now, and we want to conceal some of the blending mode that has been applied. So my color over here that I'm going to be applying is black, and now I'm going to click, hold, and drag out for this radiant, or this gradient to be applied. And as you can see in here is now was painted black over here on the mask. So it concealed the blending mode of my active layer here, which made the baby much lighter, but it kept all of here out darker because the multiplied blending mode. So I'm going to just do that a little bit more. I'm going to bring this out just a little bit more. Oh, there we go. Okay, that works for me. Okay, and as you can see, she still has that very pink look to her. So I'm going to take this just another step farther, and I'm going to make an adjustment layer. And we're going to do hue and saturation. And we're going to adjust the reds. We don't need to adjust everything, just the reds. And I'm going to bring the saturation down a little bit. Oh, that looks so much better. It's just a little bit more natural. There we go. And maybe let's take a look at the yellows. Oh yeah, there we go. I don't know if you saw that or not. There we go. That works. Okay, that's much better. That looks much more natural. Okay, so let's take a look at what we had before and what we had after. And I'm going to hold down my Alt key and click on this eye to make that the only layer visible. That's what we started with, and that's what we're ending with.